Ask about Illuminati, since the charting upbeat ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult Disney, we go from real to real. Occult Disney, Bohemian Grove and no more real. Occult Disney, ask about Illuminati. Occult Disney, we teach occult to everybody. Occult Disney, the wish upon a star. Occult Disney, you know not to travel far. Oh, Occult Disney, the new brand Pinocchio. Yeah, yeah. Occult Disney, it's a boss overflow. Occult Disney, please enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where we fly around through space using space physics to check out secrets of space and robots and things. Robots in space, that's a big thing with Wall-E, right? It appeals to the sci-fi mind somewhat.
If you believe in space.
Yeah, I was kind of putting out the space physics as a bit of bait there. So,
Oh, you got me. You baited me.
I did. This is Matt here, baiting you. Hi, Thomas. How is it?
I'm going great. I'm paranoid as ever. And we also have a special guest, Jamie Hanshaw. Welcome to Occult Disney.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
I'm excited about this one.
Well, I had a few friends that know your name and were like excited that you were coming on. So hopefully they'll be excited to hear this. But what is your kind of Disney background, I guess, or because I know some of your videos kind of delve into this corner. So.
Mm-hmm. I've been dunking on Disney for a long time. I guess when you start to become aware of things, the paranoid conspiracies, Disney had a lot to do with this in the early 2000s. And so I started looking at the life of Walt Disney. Well, the first thing that I noticed was Hannah Montana. So you remember that era? When Miley Cyrus was Hannah Montana, and that was the biggest thing in the world. And you could not go anywhere without seeing, these faces. And I just realized how much of a chokehold that the Walt Disney Corporation had on popular culture. And then I started to look into the history of the company, and you come to find out that there is so much to unpack there. I mean, he's working with Werner von Braun, the famous Nazi. He's working with the FBI. He's working with J. Edgar Hoover. He is all over the place and definitely embedded in what you would call, the elite, the Illuminati. They also have a lot of themes of occult in their movies. And then we were focused heavily on what I called princess programming in the 2000s, about like just mass consumerism and teaching girls about narcissism and just all kinds of things that are not virtuous, let's say, right? Attitudes. And I mean, I have this whole book. This is my first book that I don't sell anymore. And I guess we're going to talk about a couple of things in here with regards to Wall-E. But even the cover I put, if you can see, Disney was involved in production of
that's Der Fuhrer's face, I believe.
I'm sorry?
Der Fuhrer's face, I think, is the image you're giving us.
Yes. So propaganda films, training films, they were responsible for getting the Americans to pay their income taxes regularly. So there's just so much to talk about with Disney. And even his life is sort of a mystery. I go into that on my own channel a lot. So check it out.
Yeah,
Oh
for
yeah,
sure one of
give the
most
full plug.
airbrushed.
Where should people find you? How should they find you?
Yeah, so on YouTube, it's just Jamie Hanshaw, and the show is called Out of This World. And then if you go over to the Lives tab, I actually go through this entire book chapter by chapter because it's not on the market anymore. Talking about, World of Warcraft is one of the chapters in here. So you've got Walt Disney actually drawing the mouse ears inside of a pentagram. So I know that you guys are pretty knowledgeable about the occult and psychology here in Chicken Little. You can see they're using psychology to steer the masses, a la like Edward Bernays and Freud and people like that. What else you got?
Perfect timing, because we just recently did Chicken Little, and how the original cut, it said Mein Kampf, and then the re-release, it said mass psychology, but essentially it was the same thing.
Yes. And so Disney is huge on what they call Imagineering. And this is actually building up ideas in people's minds like a magician would. And so they are implying a lot of times that we are the magicians that, control the puppet strings of pop culture and therefore reality.
Also, that was the division of Disney that I wanted to join the most when I was working there. That was what I had my bullseye set on, was Imagineering, but it's very, very competitive in order to get into that particular career field with them.
Right. And not a lot of people know that even the theme parks, are like a extension of the military industrial complex with the contracts that they have. So when you go on a ride, it's always sponsored by a corporation, right? Small World is like UNICEF, UNESCO, and I'll let you make your own jokes about that in regards to the stabbies or whatever. But so you go on a ride and it's more of a programming than an actual like fun thing. So you are being sold products and you're being implanted with ideas. Even Epcot, the big, giant golf ball, Spaceship Earth, they call it. You are taken on this tour of I believe it's the history of writing or the written word or communications. That's what it is, the telecommunications and stuff like that. And a lot of the partners that they worked with were also Nazi related. So Siemens partnered with Disney to make Spaceship Earth. And that was also what you could see at, concentration camps. So I don't want to bogart this whole show about Disney itself, but it's definitely a psychological operation, and you can see how many different outlets they have in popular culture, and you wouldn't even know that these things are owned by Disney if you didn't look into it. Miramax, Hollywood Pictures, ABC, they have sports teams, A&E Network, Soap Network, they have magazines, cruise ships, anything. I'm not quite sure if they are the largest multimedia conglomerate to this day, but they were at the writing of this in about 2012. So
I'd say they probably have the most share within like brain real estate across the world, regardless of how much money. The real estate inside of the human mind, they have a huge share of it. It's crazy. Two of those things that you mentioned, Disney Cruise Lines, I did a whole bunch of work for them right before I left, and also the Spaceship Earth. Not only is it funded by Siemens, but it kind of jumps around. It depends on I think it's like a 4-year, like a 6-year block that a certain corporation will sponsor all of Spaceship Earth. And if you walk around to the backside of Spaceship Earth, there's sort of like a little black entryway. And if you just shimmy through there's a door. And once you go through that door, it's got this frosted glass look. And if you get buzzed in, that frosted glass turns completely clear and it goes up to this VIP area. And that VIP area, when they first built it, it was called Siemens VIP, and it had like a secret way that you could get directly into the ride and everything. But it's just this whole like executive level suite up there with all these cool like holographic images on the floors. And that was one of the the big projects that I worked on when I was at Disney, was this thing. And then it'll shift to like the AT&T VIP center. They just kind of shop it around depending on who wants to give them money. But yeah. And it's wild that that's right there in the park, and inside of this VIP center has got this one-way glass, so you can look out at the whole park and no one even knows that you're up there. Most people don't even realize there's this whole entire part of Spaceship Earth.
Fun with secret clubs. No, I was thinking though, I mentioned Montana because when this movie came out, this is I guess one of the themes we've been seeing in the 2000s is Disney trying to crack the boy code with stuff like Treasure Planet. I think to an extent this does, and the director Andrew Stanton will later do John Carter, which I don't think it's a bad movie, but it was one of the biggest flops ever, and basically destroyed any chance of him having a directing career past that. And after that point, Disney is just like, screw it, let's buy Marvel and Star Wars. So that's sort of how they cracked the code, by outsourcing it and purchasing it.
and Jamie, I sent you like a list of the movies that we were going to be doing, and out of that whole list, you picked WALL-E. Is there a reason that WALL-E stood out the most to you out of all these?
I just had a lot to say about it. I wrote a little article about it when it came out, and I just remember this was around the time when Zeitgeist was popular. You remember that old conspiracy classic?
That's the one that blended like 9/11 conspiracy theories with Jesus, like the different sort of historical versions of Jesus and a couple other things. They kind of blended a whole bunch of different conspiracies into one super documentary.
Right. And so they were talking about the Big Nine. I don't know what you can say on your channel, so I don't want to...
whatever. This is pre-recorded, so you say whatever you want.
So they had a segment about 9/11, they had a segment about the Federal Reserve, and they had a segment about how the stories of Jesus, or like Horus. And that section was poorly done, but the other two, were pretty good. But if you watch Zeitgeist 2 and Zeitgeist 3, the answer to all the world's problems was technocracy. So it was a perfect example of, the problem, reaction, solution formula. And they actually had, in the third one, they rolled out, this guy, what's his name? Jacques Fresco, who was designing this thing called the Venus Project, which was very much like one of your smart cities, a 15-minute city, something like that. And that everything was going to be automated, and it was going to be a utopia. If we could just get rid of, religion and structures of government, then we could all live in, Tomorrowland, basically, right?
And universal basic income was a huge part of that too.
Yes, exactly. And so what we're seeing here is the beginning of something that I was looking into. It's a robot dialectic. So the technology is both a oppressor and the savior. And I see this also in WALL-E. And you can see it in movies like Terminator Salvation, where it's the Skynet that is killing everybody, but then it requires the Terminator to come in and be the Messiah and, save everybody. And also the movie Transformers has this theme too. So it takes the robotic AI to save the people from the evil robotic AI. And you're going to see these themes in WALL-E too.
And also the old and new technology. I guess that's a big thing of it because, WALL-E's a junk heap, basically. It looks like Johnny Five from Short Circuit, or one of the robots from Silent Running. If anyone knows that movie, it's kind of got that vibe where, Eve is your... Apparently they ran it by, what's his name? Jonathan Ive or whatever, the Apple designer. Like they actually ran the thing by him to be like, is this like correct with the Apple aesthetic or something? So really pushing that. I do miss my old school iPod still, though. I just gotta throw that out there.
Before we start trashing technology, I thought that this movie was very well done. The artistry was impeccable. The robot, even the little Eve, that impressed me. And I don't even like Pixar. I don't even like CGI. But the way that they created these robots was so very impressive, just in an artistic way, like the reflections on them. And it was,
we've been watching every Disney movie in chronological order at this point. I think we're caught back up on track. So it's been a very real evolution from movie to movie to movie, where now we can actually see how incredible the technology has been getting. And one of the things that stood out to me in WALL-E is that now, instead of them trying to figure out how to make water look real or how to make the shadows and the materials look real. They're beyond that, and now they're actually playing with light and volumetric light and light colors and like all these weird extreme forms of shading. Like they're actually getting to do cinematography within this 3D world where you just rewind the clock a few years. Even if you go into like Cars, it looked good, but they weren't like artistically capturing these dramatic shots using just lighting. They were leveraging so much on the story. So, and I guess needless to say too, the whole first 20 plus minutes of this movie is completely silent, which is a very unique for any movie, let alone a Disney movie.
Although with the subtitles on, it was mildly distracting because it would try to give subtitles for all the little bleeps and bloops they do, some of which did resemble actual words.
In Japanese? Were you reading the subtitles in Japanese for the bleeps and bloops?
They were in English for this, but it was distracting because I'm like, oh, I felt like this is the silent part of the movie. And just to mention the cinematography, it's kind of interesting because I think they had a similar thing where they were looking back and saying like, oh, what are our movies lacking? They don't look like, big 70 millimeter things. So they artificially or digitally added in barrel distortion, lens flare, racking focus. They brought in Roger Deakins, who I know he's done like half or more of the Coen Brothers films to do the, to be a cinematography consultant here. I don't think he's a credited cinematographer on this. Yeah, just advise on lighting and atmosphere. But that does give this movie like a more realistic look. And I would say in that first 30 minutes, of course, once they get onto the ship, it's more sterile, purposefully. And the budget for this is insane. It's 180 million, which it
looks like it.
Yeah, it looks like it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I don't understand how money goes into animation. I mean, I know it costs a lot, but I just, like with a live action, it's like, oh, you got to make the costumes, you got to get the sets, find the location.
There's something similar now too, though. Like even if you're using the most up-to-date tech, you can have like a render farm, for example. If you're Disney, you can kind of just print money, but this costs real money where you create your whole scene in Maya and all of the different lighting and the camera movement. But unless you've got an entire building just filled with computers to crank out those frames, usually you'll just kind of like upload it to some remote service and they'll crank it out virtually. They can just spin up thousands of computers. And when you've got a budget or a timeline, Disney can quite literally just rent out all of the available resources in one of these farms, theoretically, and just crank out their movies. So sometimes now it's not like in Toy Story where you hear about this like year-long render time. Now, if you can crank out a year-long render time, and it's like, well, you can have that in a few hours, but how much money do you have in order to make that happen? So there's a large part, aside from all of the celebrity voices and all of the big-name director credits and all of this, there's a very real cost about how fast do you want it and how much are you willing to get it done that fast.
I mean, maybe they are just getting better at laundering money too, because I'm like, Mission Impossible, The Last Indiana Jones, $300 million. I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't compute for me. I mean, movies used to like Raiders
They're
of the
pulling a
Lost Ark,
Demolition Man.
the first Indiana Jones was like $12 million. How are we making the new one for 300? It doesn't compute.
Inflation, man, it's out of control.
That's part of it, yeah. But it is weird with budgets. This one, of course, did make its money back. Here's a thought I'm having just about the cultural footstep of this one, though. I have a very vivid, you occasionally have those like burned in memories, like just like a photographic. I don't have a photographic memory, but you have those occasional images in your life. And for some reason, going to a theater to see this is a seared image in my brain. And then since this movie's come out, the reputation's held, but it's not something they've capitalized on much. I don't think there's been a Wall-E TV show.
Did you go through a trauma of some kind? Because even the word seared in your brain makes me feel like maybe you were going through a traumatic moment and you just happened to see Wall-E at this time.
No, I remember a very pleasant memory of going to see it and enjoying the movie. In fact, every reviewing I haven't liked it as much as the first time, to be honest. So, but it's just interesting that going and seeing, maybe because of the hyper realness of the imagery, where they're actually trying to recreate the film, maybe that somehow did it, where it maybe just like tapped on the uncanny valley a little bit,
The one to me too that made me feel a little bit dirty is that you feel emotion for these robots, and whenever that happens to me, I like somewhere deep down I know in my soul that like like the Satan just won a little bit. I don't know how else to phrase that, but he just made me like tear up over a robot, and I know that humanity is doomed because of that.
Well, that's part of the insidious thing about Disney is they can manipulate your emotions however they want to. And yes, making people feel for inanimate objects, and especially robots, is definitely one of the key things that will make transhumanism possible. Right?
I've got a very same criticism for Toy Story series, where I think that it is perhaps the most insidious of all Disney movies, worse than showing boobies in the adventures, or worse than the word sex in The Lion King. That making kids love their toys and want to protect their toys and think that there's a soul in these toys. And then I think we point out in Toy Story 2, they kind of show how much Sid is a bad guy because he's taking knockoff toys and making his own out of that, which really is someone taking garbage and reusing these parts. Like, he's actually contributing some way into the world, but he's seen as evil because these are knockoffs. These are not fully licensed retail store-bought toys. Therefore, he's the bad guy. And that's something that if you're 3 or 4 or 5 and you've got a soft skull that's being beaten into your head, it's like, love your Disney trademarked retail toys and be weary of anyone that makes their own toys or is playing with like a knockoff of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I when I was a kid, my friend across the street and we turned all of our GI Joes into X-Men because they didn't make X-Men toys in the late 80s. So, so we were kind of doing the Sid thing. We were painting.
You were evil villains like Sid was, yeah.
Yeah, but we needed to have a Cyclops. We had to be creative. This is one of the movies that it sounds like one of those apocryphal stories, so maybe it is. But there's that thing like a 1994 lunch ended up coming up with the ideas for this, A Bug's Life, Monsters Inc., and Finding Nemo. So their pitch is that all of these movies came out of one lunch meeting.
I mean, yeah, but except what happens in those lunch meetings is people realize this is their moment to pitch it directly to the people that can give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So it's almost, maybe this is a strained analogy, but it's almost like when someone claims to be like a freestyle rapper and they get up on stage and they spit out this like 2 or 3 minute like amazing rap. Well, they didn't think that entire thing up on their own. They strung it together based on things that they've been working on their entire lives until they can cohesively like patch it together on the fly and kind of make little tweaks. And that's what these lunches really are. It's someone bringing the thing that they've been working on for maybe their entire life and then finally getting it in front of the people that it can be in front of. It wouldn't totally surprise me, but I would assume that people weren't just brainstorming on the way to lunch and like, okay, there's this movie about a robot and like,
Oh yeah, for sure. Also might have just been at the lunch meeting, like, let's make a movie about a robot. It didn't really get fleshed in. There is one thing that they were stuck on for a while for the story, which I don't know if this would have made the movie better or worse, but it is completely insane. It says when Wall-E comes into the Axiom in the original, he sets the robots on a rebellion against the remnants of the human race, which were cruel alien gels, completely de-evolved, gelatinous, boneless, legless, see-through green creatures that resemble Jello. So they're going to humans have turned into these weird, creepy aliens. And it's kind of a Planet of the Apes style reveal that, oh, these are actually the humans, which would have been that would have been more traumatic, I guess.
Yeah, they've actually devolved in Wall-E. Right?
Yeah. So babies.
Yes, here they devolve into babies. Basically, where in the original pitch or the earlier versions of the script, they would have turned into evil, gelatinous green aliens. Which
I think both of those approaches are entirely rooted in the contempt for humanity that the writers or whoever came up with this particular aspect kind of had. This is like a misanthropic approach. So the big baby one, I think, is more tongue in cheek. And the gelatinous green one was a little bit more on the nose, but effectively they're both making the same message that, that this human consciousness is inferior to the Wall-E and the Eve consciousness.
Yeah, what kind of rubs me the wrong way is I stay relatively trim, but I'm genetically like a chubby dude, right? So I really have to put a lot of work into not being a chubby dude. So watching these people makes me angry.
Well, this is the cartoon version of what you would call, Walmart people, right? Except in this movie, it's more like Costco because the corporation is called By and Large. And watching the movie, you see that everything is by and large just like Disney. So it's kind of meta because so much of our stuff comes from Walt Disney, or it could even be like a BlackRock or something like that. It's just the corporation that owns everything. And you can even see in the scene where the president is addressing from the official presidential podium, behind him, it doesn't say the White House, the United States, it says By and Large.
He's president / CEO is the feel
Yes.
that you get, that the company has become so ginormous that it has dwarfed any government on the planet. So this is just the government, the president, the corporation all in one, which does seem like something that Disney wants to achieve too.
And in the scene where Wall-E is blasting off to go to the ship, he passes by the moon, and they've already set up things on the moon like it was an outlet mall, a By and Large outlet mall on the moon right next to the lunar lander and the American flag there on the moon. So it's a colonization of corporatocracy, you could say.
It's also fascinating that, the only functioning technology on Earth is, of course, Wall-E, who's still kicking after 700 years, and the triggered ads that continue to come up as he goes through the landscape. Like, for some reason, the kind of hollow ads are still functioning.
Yeah.
Built to last. That's what those were.
I'm wondering, maybe we'll get into like the occult aspects of this now. I'm wondering, where do you think Wall-E's soul came from? Because he's clearly has a different level of consciousness than any other robot on Earth, at least. And then again, he's the only robot left on Earth, so we don't really know if this was typical for all the Wall-Es or if it's something unique to him. But he ends up having like this kind of extra Rosicrucian consciousness.
I think we're supposed to believe that this is what has preserved him beyond all of the rest of the Wall-Es, is his evolving. His consciousness is evolving because he's, curious, he's creative, he's sentimental, he is becoming human.
I mean, time is part of it, right? It's been 700 years of isolation and and watching Hello Dolly. Is that the one he's watching? Anyway, is it Hello Dolly? Anyway, doesn't matter. But
I believe it was Hello Dolly.
Just the length of time is interesting. It's also interesting. I don't know if this properly cues in, but this is the only Pixar movie with a bit of live action footage, mentioning the president and stuff. So we're also seeing a little bit of actual people in this movie as opposed to just animation. So,
well, speaking of getting into the occult, I wanted to just kind of bring this up real fast. This is one of the early chapters I wrote in the first book, Sorcerers and Robots, a love story. And you will see in the occult the desire to subvert other people's free will, and that is the definition of sorcery, right? He wants to affect change in consciousness on a mass scale through the consciousness of other people and kind of make them submit to his will. And we've even got, who is the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? Remember that? Mickey Mouse. And so, through this sorcery, you get things like golems, artificial things that are to do the bidding of the magician or the sorcerer. And then you also have these tales of robots going back really far into ancient Greece. They mention them in Ovid's Metamorphoses. And I don't know if you guys know the story of Pygmalion. Have you heard that one?
At some point, I didn't prep it for this one, but
so they already had these things called the Golden Maidens, which were basically just like artificial creations that were sex slaves. But then the story of Pygmalion, he was a sculptor who fell in love with a statue. So according to the legend, he was going around Cyprus and he saw these women practicing prostitution, and he got so mad. I mean, he was like, watching too much whatever podcast, right? So he got way too mad and he decided to remain celibate and just occupy himself with sculpting. So he's like a proto MGTOW, right? He's like eschewing women and their dirty ways, and he's just gonna like sculpt, but he ends up sculpting a woman, and then Aphrodite feels bad for him and brings it to life. So this is like one of the earliest stories that you get of like a robot or a creation or something that is made that later on takes on consciousness, right?
I like the reference to the Sorcerer's Apprentice, because one of the many themes that we've noticed watching all these Disney movies is that whenever they want to show an apprentice sorcerer, someone that just learned that they've got an ability to affect the objective world, is they use that ability to clean up trash. In Sorcerer's Apprentice, he uses it to clean up the little dungeon. In Sword in the Stone, they use it to clean up all of the sink and the plates so that he can go out and have fun. And in Wall-E, if Wall-E is this sort of sorcerer's apprentice, he's literally just cleaning up trash. So whenever you want to show like the first degree of whatever society that they're in to like learn how to become human and learn how to use magic, it always starts with cleaning up trash.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, on the Axiom themselves, they seem to be becoming like less conscious, less soulful. There's the thing where the lady is like, "What? We have a pool on here?" Because she's just not even been engaged with any kind of reality for probably her entire life. Because they do show, classes of children being indoctrinated into the by and large, is it, system and all of that. So the humans, Wall-E is the most conscious creature in this movie, because the humans themselves, I get at the end they start to wake up, but the whole point is they have to wake up.
Yes. So essentially all the humans on the Axiom, which that's an interesting name. I mean, that's what a self-evident truth or something that we all agree to be true. They are 700 years generations of iPad kids. And Wall-E is the one who does not live in Plato's cave, like you just said. So they are all in a false reality, and he has to come and bring them out of that.
Although it's sort of a real reality, because they have not had war for 7 years. They obviously have not had famine. So there's something to be said. I wonder too, at the end of Wall-E, when they all return back to Earth and repopulate it, doesn't that just mean humans start warring with each other too?
Yeah, it's a Battlestar Galactica thing, right?
Yeah, but then I guess the thing is they have the ability to do that, which don't choose to do that, but there's no choice on the ship. I mean, you are not getting out of that chair. And I do wonder, I mean, they show the captain at the end, getting out of his chair like
Right, the first time a human being has actually tried to walk like a big baby in
right.
So years.
I'm like, they need physical rehab to even try and reconstitute the Earth, because the whole point is it's supposed to be microgravity, I guess. Like, it's not full gravity on the ship. So physically, these people are also kind of destroyed. Like, it doesn't seem they can just bounce up and start. Even the kids, by that time, that a little bit of genetics would have caused everyone to not function on Earth anymore. That, if people end up on Mars, I guess that's what we'll find out. If people, that born on Mars can't really function on Earth properly. I think that's been posited as a possibility.
Right, that you would. I think this is one of the plot lines in the show The Expanse, is that depending on which planet you spend most of your time on, you can kind of atrophy relative to another planet that has, more gravity. Like, all of a sudden now your body just can't handle that level of gravity because it's already become acclimated to a completely different one.
So physically, humanity's still doomed in this movie. Peter Gabriel singing to us at the end can't fix that.
I like him.
Oh, I do too. I was really happy when he was in this movie, because we got in Tarzan and the other one where they got in Phil Collins, and especially Tarzan. It's like, get Peter Gabriel for that. What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of the soundtracks, so several of the songs are actually from 2001 Space Odyssey. So at the climax, you actually hear that thus spake Zarathustra, right? And even the director of Wall-E, Andrew Stanton, he told Wired magazine that the film was an homage to 2001, which we were talking about this with Thomas on his channel. That is one of the most esoteric movies on my list that has ever been. So he said that the film was an homage to 2001 Space Odyssey, Alien, Blade Runner, Close Encounters, and several other sci-fi movies. And that's why you see, like you said at the beginning, there's no dialogue. It's just Wall-E on the planet. And that's very much like 2001 Space Odyssey, the caveman scene, right? So there's a lot of parallels going on with Wall-E and 2001, and we'll discuss this in a second. Probably the ship, the evil AI on the ship is that glowing red eye, just like Hal from 2001. The man has to confront and surpass the machine in order to survive and evolve. That's in both movies. Another song from both of those is The Blue Danube. And so you've got this theme that humanity is reborn in both films through the assistance of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I'm thinking the 2001 version, the artificial intelligence is, well, like you said, so esoteric because Hal's murdering them. But then it is, the monolith seems to be some kind of technology as well. That's sort of that, so far of past us, it's just magic. So it turns into, the trippiest sequence in film. But
well, if in that, I guess, analogy, Wall-E would be the monolith. He's the source of this weird technology consciousness that no one can quite define.
Although another thing, talking about how you were mentioning once they're back on Earth, assuming that they can rebuild society, wars are going to start soon. And in 2001, what's the first thing you see after the monkey sequence? He tosses the bone into the air. It becomes
the nuclear warship, right?
Yes, exactly. So
if you believe in nuclear warship.
But in its context of the movie, that's the message being given, which is kind of weird because someone has to tell you trivia to know that. Really, I don't think you can tell just by looking at it, especially if you're in a theater in 1968. You're not going to pick up on that.
Unless you're the ultimate film snob, because the whole analogy being that the bone that the monkeys are using to beat each other is like technology. This is the first form of technology that humanoids get their hands on, immediately becomes a weapon, and then therefore, even through thousands of years of evolution, if you believe in evolution, that technology still ultimately remains a weapon, which is something you don't really see in Wall-E, except for that he has a little laser that he can use to kind of weld and cut things open. But technically, I mean, if he shot that at one of these big babies, he would just be slicing off and immediately cauterizing appendages, I assume.
Yeah, it'd be like whaling or something.
Like if the same type of HAL 9000 self-preservation or that Otto in this movie has that kicks in, if Wall-E had that same version of self-preservation, he would just turn into a little Terminator.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, a truly evolved AI, like a truly conscious AI, would probably perceive humanity as a threat, like we were talking about with Ratatouille. There, I got it right this time. Ratatouille, like anyone sees Remy the rat and he's dead, So Wall-E could get that in his head, and probably rightfully so, especially once the humans are a little more mobile and wary of robots.
Well, Wall-E is not the only one with the little spark of divinity, because Eve seemingly also has human-like qualities. As soon as her transport leaves, when they drop her off on Earth to look for the plant, when it takes off, she starts flying around and zooming around and having fun, right? So she's now free to enjoy her own free will and expression, which is a human thing too.
It seems like we're watching her evolve in this movie, because when she first appears, she is very robotic, and So there's a case where time doesn't do it. Maybe some kind of proximity to Wall-E does it in that case.
Maybe it's like Schumann resonance. Maybe it's just the Earth itself is the thing that's giving that, because that's the only thing that they really share in common, especially her being brand new to this planet, only here for a short amount of time. She doesn't even really come in contact with Wall-E, but she does start playing right away. So yeah, maybe it's like an Earth thing.
Good point.
Maybe that is how the humans can survive once they return to Earth, that sort of thing.
You could think too, would Eve have played if there wasn't life on Earth? Like because the whole premise, right, is that the Axiom sends these little pods to Earth, and they go and they look for organic materials, some form of life, specifically foliage, that they can refoliate the Earth. And that's what, basically might be like, if there wasn't foliage, then maybe she wouldn't have played, because there wouldn't have been that energy for her to detect in the first place. And Matt, I'm glad you brought up silent running, because I hadn't even heard or seen that movie before. But when I was looking at other Wall-E breakdowns, it kept coming up. So I watched that movie as well. And it's essentially the same premise, except instead of sending bots to Earth to look for foliage, they're sending humans into space to try and kind of like add foliage. And essentially they want to figure out how the Earth can be refoliated, but everyone thinks that's a pipe dream. They kind of laugh at it when someone's like, you want to plant something on the Earth, and they just kind of laugh it off.
Yeah, and in that movie, it's in the first 20 minutes. What Bruce Stern basically, they tell him to nuke all the biospheres, and Bruce Stern murders his crew and then goes into rings where he can't be found again, and just living with robots now. So,
and rabbits.
Yes. And what is it? Is Joan Baez doing the music? That's always weird in that movie. It's kind of nothing wrong with Joan Baez. It's just a strange fit, when you're watching technology and hearing folk strummings. That's the 70s. But yeah, there's that dystopian 70s sci-fi thing. One of my other podcasts right now, we're moving through the Planet of the Apes TV show, which, but the strange or weird. Just the sci-fi in the 70s seems to be kind of a darker thing, Star Wars still has a look of 70s sci-fi, but that's where it becomes more, space opera. It becomes more of a rollicking adventure, I guess. I mean, you can read what you want to into that movie. The tone is very different than the sci-fi after 2001. That wants to have more of that vibe. And there were several movies around this time, I think, trying to redo that vibe. Oblivion with Tom Cruise comes to mind of being one that was really trying to do the dystopian 70s thing. So it was a little bit in the air at this time.
I feel like sci-fi, especially in that era, was always trying to sort of be a cautionary tale to not take this too far, like in Battlestar Galactica, where they made the Cylons to be the servants, and then they rose up and took over, right? And in Wall-E, the Axiom attempts to keep his control over the humans, and then he's eventually foiled by Wall-E and the humans together. But the moral of this story in Wall-E is that humans and robots need each other to continue to evolve.
How about cockroaches? They're still on Earth. They're still living. They're not foliage. They're fauna, right? But the cockroaches are there. A failing of this movie is they really try to make the cockroach cute, and it's just not happening, for me at least.
That's a good point. Like what was the cockroach eating in order to survive, right? Because if you could just follow that through it, and I guess it would be more boring if Eve was just looking for amino acids versus like an actual plant.
I mean, molds and fungus would be useful in this case, right? Spores, molds, and fungus, just to quote Ghostbusters.
Wasn't there a scene where Wall-E fed the roach a Twinkie because that kind of stuff doesn't break out?
Right.
But there's got to be more cockroaches than the one. And they can't all be eating Twinkies. So there's something going on, like creepy crawlies right under the surface. That must be happening still. I mean, I know the joke is like, oh, only the cockroaches will survive in an apocalypse, but like they still have to survive.
Well, I like Jamie brought up the Twinkie too. That's a recurring theme in Zombieland, where Woody Harrelson wants Twinkies, and it's one of the few things that has actually survived a zombie apocalypse because of all the preservatives. Like, it's not real food, so it kind of like lasts forever. And maybe this is another insidious sort of memory planting where a part of the subplot of Silent Running is that nobody else cared about organic food. No, everyone. There's one line in particular where Bruce Dern's like, "You guys don't even appreciate real food," and someone makes a snarky comment. It's like, "Oh, it's real if it comes out of the dirt," and it sounds like an idiocracy thing, right? Like, oh, you're gonna the toilet water, you're gonna drink it from the toilet water, right? So there's this premise though where they're making it seem that artificial food is also superior to organic food, which maybe will lead into where the hell is all the food coming from on the Axiom? Like, everyone's drinking shakes. Where the hell is that coming from?
Well, that's a good point because Disney's Tomorrowland was originally sponsored by Monsanto. So you get all your GMOs and plastics and microplastics, and you can thank, Franken crops and stuff on Monsanto. And I think that was also another allude to, by and large, is those big corporations. But yeah, fake food. I mean, try and go to Disneyland and find a real meal. It's not going to be too easy.
Let's get one of those turkey legs, but those are also probably like steroid.
Yeah, they're probably like genetically modified ostriches or I don't know. However dark you want to get with Disney and theme parks, we can find evidence for that.
What about Disneyland Japan, Matt? What kind of food there? Can you get some fresh sushi and all of the different little nooks and crannies?
Not in all the nooks and crannies, but basically you can reserve a table service restaurant and get some actually pretty good stuff. And then the counter service stuff is generally okay. It's definitely better than the American stuff. Like in Japan, you go to Tokyo Disney, and
we have a certain refined palate here in the States.
Yes, but no, you expect that you're probably going to eat something decent. The turkey legs still look like garbage, though. If you're wondering, I don't buy the turkey legs there.
Well, that's one of the. Go ahead, you finish.
Oh, I was just saying. Last time I went, I had it was like Italian, but it was Sugar Rush, Wreck-It Ralph theme. So it was Italian appetizers made to look like a dessert, but it was all like, savory and beans and pork and stuff. So
usually
that's interesting.
The other way around.
Yeah. But it's interesting that this appetizer is supposed to look like a dessert, and it's not. So I don't know.
I had a butterbeer at Universal Studios recently, and it was disgusting.
I've heard that's not fantastic. And the blue milk, we don't have those in Japan, but the blue milk apparently is not that fantastic.
Yeah.
It tastes even worse when you realize you just paid $20 for a flat cream soda.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's the other charm of Tokyo Disney and the exchange rate right now. I went there. I used for that Italian dinner. I used my card. It was like 2,600 yen. When it came through on my American card, it was like $17. I was like, score, because that's. I mean, you'd pay twice as much for that in the American parks. My ticket was only $55 also, which we've talked about this. So they start at like 110 now in the States.
Double that.
I just read a lot of people are choosing to not go to Disney because they keep hiking up the price. I believe a ticket now is around $200.
Yep.
Well, I went a few weeks ago for $55. Yay.
Wow. But even Disney World in Orlando, at one point, that was the most visited place on Earth. So, like, the happiest place on Earth had the most people, and also international people. So everyone is coming from all over the world to this one spot to be programmed with these ideologies.
Well, that's still part of the business model of Disney World, is they realize people have once in a lifetime trips. They'll save up for the whole year, sometimes 2 years, to bring the whole family there, and it becomes this whole big event. And one of the business thinkings of Disney now is that, well, if someone's willing to spend like $5,000 to go and get the hotel and the airfare and bring the 4 kids and everything, then they'll probably spend another $1,000 just to make sure that they can ride all the rides. So they start nickel and diming, and now you can get lightning pass for like the whole park, and then you can do all these extra little upcharges to make sure that if you're only going to be here for 5 days and you're never coming back again, you'd be crazy not to spend an extra $1,000 or $2,000 to make sure that you get the full experience. And that sort of mentality means that they don't care if you were just going to pop in for a day or two and then leave again and then come back again later that year. You're not really the ones that they can milk thousands and thousands of extras out of, and they're kind of focusing on that demographic way more than, like you said, being the most visited. We don't care about that. We want people that come here to spend the most per capita.
And it's almost like a pilgrimage. When you put it that way, it's bordering on some kind of holy experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, imagine a group of kids that, like, 6 out of 10 have been to Disney World, and the other 4, now there's this whole tribalism that'll come up. It's almost like a status symbol for your childhood. Oh, what do you mean your grandparents or your parents never brought you to Disney World? Not even once? Wow. Like, I guess they don't love you that much.
You haven't been initiated.
Right. No, I realize I'm here doing a Disney podcast. I was fully programmed by Epcot, Center. My parents took me there when I was 5 years old, and that is like 80s Epcot's like my favorite aesthetic now, right?
I mean, I grew up in Florida, so same thing. I went there. I mean, every time you would graduate from middle school or high school, they had these like Disney graduation nights. So Disney just became a reward for the infant me, the toddler me, the middle school and the high school me. That became Disney and Universal Studios were the way that the world showed me that I was like, worth rewarding somehow.
I grew up on the opposite side in LA, so close to LA. So Disney was at least once a year, twice when we grew up. It was just something we just hop in the car and go to for an afternoon. Just go to downtown Disney for dinner. It was definitely something that your social life sort of revolved around, and like a go-to event. Can't even tell you how many times I've been to Disneyland in Anaheim.
You got to get your annual programming to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, living here is the first time I've been within like real close distance. I mean, it's still like a 2-hour, somewhat expensive train ride, so it's not something I would go to all the time.
You're fully programmed. None of us have to. All 3 of us are Disney programmed, whether we wanted to or not. Right? It's something. It's epigenetic almost.
Well, I do go to Tokyo and just go to the park and then come home. So,
it's a cross-generational thing because, grandma went to Disney and she wants to take the grandkids. And so it's going back to 1955 for the theme parks, at least. You have all of these generations and their memories are being made and they revolve around this Disney ethos. And you even have people like do the Disney weddings. I'm surprised there's not such thing as a Mickey Mouse baptism right now.
You pay enough money, I'm sure they can make arrangements.
You can do it at Splash Mountain,
Copyright laws are a little more lax here, so you can have Mickey Mouse yakitori at a festival.
I don't know how it is in the international parks, but in Disneyland and in Disney World for the longest time, they had very much military-inspired dress code. And one of those things, like if you're in the military, you're not allowed to have hair that goes beneath, like halfway up your earlobe. And if you have a mustache, it has to be trimmed to very specific points. You can't have a beard. There's very specific, like rigid, structured laws about how you're allowed to just present yourself. And one of the reasons that Disney does that is because they want it so that if you went with your grandparents when you're a little baby and they take pictures of you outside of, Space Mountain or whatever, that if you look in the background, all the cast members, all the people that are just like the worker bees should look almost identical, that if you took the picture in 1984 or 2024, and that was very intentional so that it becomes timeless, so that, when you bring your kid back, it doesn't look like, oh, this is totally different than when I went as a kid. It's supposed to look the same as when you went as a kid to kind of keep up that nostalgia, that weird, like you've been plucked out of reality and put into this weird vacuum in time space.
Mm-hmm.
In Japan, add a 10 times 10 multiplier to that. That's Japan Inc. If you work in an office, they probably have,
you have to work at Disney
rules like that. Yeah, it's not just Disney. So it's like hyper, everyone really does look the same. I mean, look at, footage of Tokyo in the 60s. It really doesn't look different. The signs have a slightly different font, and that's about it.
And this would make the Axiom perfect for a Disney park or even Epcot. In fact, The Axiom
Disney
ship
cruise ship.
seems like it's Epcot in space. It's Disney Cruise Line, but it's Epcot in space, complete with the little people movers, right? And they've kind of evolved into this weird sort of state of being, but for 700 years, nothing has changed. They haven't advanced at all. They haven't discovered, if anything, they've devolved personally, but the technology that they're using has kind of stayed the same, just like Wall-E's basically stayed the same for 700 years, aside from slowly gaining consciousness somehow.
I mean, it's a basic time machine, H.G. Wells concept, right? You got the Elor, the humans now, and I guess the Morlocks would be the robots in this case, especially the HAL robot.
Right, but the difference is that in the time machine, they kind of represented evolution, that these long stretches of time that separated them also represented all this advancement that got them to these different types of technologies and buildings and cultures. But in Wall-E, it's like people left the planet 700 years ago, and the only thing that changed is they just got fatter and turned into babies, but everything else pretty much stayed identical.
Well, they're given a little tiny illusion of variety and change in the scene where everybody's wearing red, and then the machine says red, blue is the new red, or something like. Everyone's wearing blue, and so they just change the one color, and it's like, ooh, right?
It's like a DLC or something.
Right. Although, what is their currency? I mean, do they need currency? Is this the universal income?
No,
they're not buying anything.
War. Yeah. They're all well taken care of. I mean, they're all like, no one's starving. There's no war. There's nothing to really prevent them or require any currency. But again, I want to speculate, where does all the food come from? If they don't have any sort of organic material, and they don't show that they've got sort of like a Star Trek style, like, thing that can just generate food automatically, where is all this food coming from? Where is all the shakes coming from?
I wondered that, and it reminded me of that movie Cloud Atlas. Do you remember the big reveal at the end of that is they were recycling people for food?
Or Soylent Green, or even Snowpiercer. Yeah, all of those kind of. And I think that's the context, is that they are eating people. That's the only place that all of this this liquid diet can possibly be coming from.
Snowpiercer, there's another one. The Snowpiercer is powered by children, literally. And I guess they're eating bugs. They're eating bugs, but then powering the train with children. That's how it works in that one, I believe. It's been a few years since I watched Snowpiercer. And the disturbing thing, I guess, that maybe the thing that really doesn't sit well, I've been kind of intimating that there's things in Pixar that watching it 15 years down the line, you're like, huh? The level of bureaucracy on the ship strips everyone of ambition. I'm like, someone's got to have ambition at some point. The captain finally has a little bit of ambition, I guess, but just assuming that thousands of humans are going to be that malleable and having no ambition or having no new ideas seems kind of misanthropic.
Yeah, you kind of wonder how new humans even get born when everybody's just like a blob, like a boneless blob, right? And then one of the funny scenes was he is going down the rabbit hole of learning about Earth. He's like, what is Earth? And then they explain it to him. He's like, what is pizza or whatever? So he like stays up all night just deep diving on Earth's history.
Which we've all done about Earth's history in various forums, I think. But yes,
if you believe in Earth.
But yeah, he's just now, after 700 years, learning the wiki dive, rabbit hole dive, or going wherever you go. But like, just everyone's, I don't know. It's hard for me to accept. It's so nihilistic just to believe that humanity would be that soulless, and Wall-E's the only thing that really has a soul in this movie. Eve gets one, and the humans start to wake up at the end. That's what we get.
Well, again, if the premise is that the soul somehow is related to Earth, then them being separated from Earth for 700 years, but Wall-E being on the Earth for those 700 years, it plays into that theory, right? That they become less ambitious and like less human-like because they've been separated from what made them human to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. If we do have space travel, what does your brain turn to mush once you get out of the Van Allen belt? You no longer think straight.
There's a couple other notes on this cannibal theory of the axiom that everyone's just eating people on this spaceship for 700 years. One of those is that there's no old people anywhere in the entire movie. There's a couple people that have gray hair, but they actually have a youthful appearance. Even if you were a big fat baby, if you were an old big fat baby, you'd probably still have some sort of blemishes or wrinkles, and they went out of their way, or maybe just didn't add anyone that looked old. Everyone on this ship is like 40 or younger, most likely. They also show when Wall-E is traversing the ship and trying to deliver this plant so that the ship can go back home. Every time he's going through these garbage chutes and he meets all the other Wall-Es, the Wall-E 10s and like the big guys, and every single piece of garbage on this entire ship is inorganic material. It's all metal and like just kind of crusty scrapings. There's no organic material at all, meaning that there's no waste of organic material. So yeah, that also, and then also in the very beginning of the movie, when they're showing these kind of infomercial versions of get on the B&L cruise ship and all this, it shows a robot doing almost like a hibachi grill. It's like chopping up solid chunks of meat. And throughout the rest of the movie, there's no solid food. All the food on the entire cruise ship has now been reduced to these like liquid milkshakes. So it all kind of points to cannibalism being a very realistic theory for this.
Yeah, and waste. Was it Star Trek Discovery? They have the far future segment where they make it clear like this apple is made of reconstituted feces.
Is that cannibalism?
Well, I'm saying it would also be going on here. Your meat maybe is from the Logan's Run thing. Maybe they have Sanctuary somewhere in the middle, not Sanctuary, Carousel in the middle of their ship to blow people up and then cook them up real good,
Where does it go?
But you said no organic material, which would also, unfortunately suggest waste. So that might be reconstituted as well,
It's like Dune with those suits that just recycle all of the moisture.
Yeah. You're literally stewing in your own juices there.
Yeah.
There's another theory that might be fun to play with on this one, and I guess this one's a little bit on the surface because Eve is literally called Eve, and they're trying to refoliate the earth, and that they've left the promised land, or they're coming back to this promised land. So it has all these biblical connotations to it. But there's almost like a Garden of Eden theory, and I can't tell if Eden is supposed to be the ship or if Eden is supposed to be the earth, and that it's just been kind of ruined and they're returning back to Eden. But the whole premise is that Wall-E gives a plant to Eve, and then Eve brings that to humanity, which introduces them to knowledge of good and evil. And then they basically return back to Earth. ... in my mind, and then rediscover warfare. So it's almost like Wall-E is Lucifer delivering this apple to Eve, and then Eve brings the apple to the rest of humanity, Adam / everyone on the axiom, and that begins like the downfall all over again, because they were in a utopian, maybe not paradise, because they're bored and they're slowly turning into these big babies, but also free from war. So unless they truly are cannibals, it almost seems that this was a downfall for them. This is humans falling all over again.
Well, you can't, if you want free will, I guess you can't be too happy. You can't be that happy. You can't just be swaddled and have free will.
Well, I think there's something to that, Eve as a Promethean character, because two things. Wall-E hands her a light bulb, and it lights up in her hand.
Oh, good call.
And he hands her a lighter, and she's looking at this flame. So two little instances of sort of a illumination, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, like that. It was almost her showing that she's got advanced technology, but really it was her showing that I've got this consciousness too.
Mm-hmm.
But disturbingly, hers can be shut down as soon as the plant shows up. Subroutines kick in, her eyes go blank, and then she becomes a vessel for the plant, an unthinking, unmoving vessel for the plant. That's when Wall-E's just kind of pulling around town.
as I was watching that too, it almost seemed like this was Wall-E introducing Eve to some kind of psychedelic drug, and she immediately goes on this inward exploration. Like you said, she shuts down and stops moving around, but maybe who knows what's going on inside Eve's brain at that point. Like she's probably tripping out.
No, I don't trust by and large. I think they just shut her off. I like the idea she's having a psychedelic experience, but I'm pretty sure they just turned her off. Like the corporation.
Well, she enters like a low energy mode, but again, like that could just be some kind of hypnagogic state, right?
She's doing her shadow work in there.
Yeah, she's doing her. Another weird thing that if you look at the scene when we meet the captain and he's with Otto, before we even figure out that Otto's like a bad guy, but they show all the different captains. They've kind of got like the layout of all the different guys since they've been at space. And if you add all of those years together, it equals exactly 666 years from the moment the movie takes place to when the very first captain got his picture put up on this. So is that just like a strange coincidence that exactly 666 years of captains? And also,
come on, the designer is very clearly doing that. I mean, I would have done that.
and if you look the ages of the captains, that even though people have apparently devolved in some way into these babies, they're also consistently living around 120 to 130 years.
Oh, interesting. I didn't catch that.
Make clear there's like microgravity. Maybe that's one of the reasons people aren't looking so old. I don't think it's a theory. I think they're eating them in the end, but they might not look as old because it says microgravity. It's unclear how much gravity is on the ship, but it seems it's not Earth gravity. Where was I going with that? The train derailed. Sorry. Please continue.
I was just looking up A113 because that comes up in the movie a couple times, and it says it was a classroom number at the Cal Arts Institute.
I think that shows up in most Pixar movies. Yeah, some reference to that number is in most.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be on a license plate. It'll be, and I've got a number of people that I worked with that vetted that. Yeah, absolutely. That anyone went to Cal Arts. That was the room for animation, and you had to take that class if you wanted to go into any form of animation. So it serves as a very real initiation, so that even if two people end up working together on some sort of a Disney animation, or more specifically Pixar, then you can reasonably guess that they also went through this particular class, and they would know what A113 is. So this was like a boys club sort of reference. Like the very first secret society they were all admitted into was A113.
Oh, I remember. I was thinking of have I ever mentioned the satanic breakfast on this podcast?
Go on.
Yeah, my aunt lives in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Delaware has no sales tax, so in the 90s we'd visit, and my parents and I and the friendlies would have a $2.22 breakfast. So if we all three got breakfast, it was $6.66. So I insisted that we get a satanic breakfast whenever we were leaving. Just for fun. Hey, it makes a good story 30 years later, or at least it makes a story 30 years later.
That's one of those, like, back in my day, you could get a whole breakfast for $2. It's like, okay, Grandpa, let's get you to sleep.
Wasn't the original price for Disneyland like 50 cents or something like that?
I think you could just go in for years and you'd just buy the ticket books. So
Oh, I see.
that's why they talk about e-tickets, right? Because until the early 80s, you'd have to buy the e-ticket to ride the big ride.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess you have to do again with, you mentioned the lightning lanes. I know Tokyo still has a lot of free fast passes. You have to do them through the app now, but yeah, there's still a couple you pay for, you know? Like the new section, like don't anyone that's thinking of going to Tokyo now, just skip Disney Sea for the next year. It's a mess. That is the second gate there.
The specs for that one time it wasn't built yet at Disney Japan, right?
Yeah, there's land and sea there.
And
83 for land and 2001 for sea, I think.
And then is there one in China?
There's two in China. There's Hong Kong and Shanghai.
Okay. Those looked really technologically advanced.
Oh yeah, and Shanghai I think opened like 2015, 2016, and Hong Kong at the same time when they opened it, they kind of went on the cheap. So 10 years later, they had to put a bunch more money into Hong Kong. So they're both the most recent ones easily. So I'm sure that like they're pirates, right, and has insane technology or something.
I wonder if there is a esoteric secret behind the locations, because I know in California they actually hooked up with some people at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, to help them study ley lines and put the original Disneyland carousel on the convergence of several ley lines so that the power would be magnified.
Maybe
and the extra $20, I assume that's what it amounts to.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Tokyo one, the story of that is in the 60s and 70s, there's the Oriental Land Company. That's still the name of it, by the way, which sounds bad, I guess, in an American context. But whatever. They started reclaiming land in Tokyo Bay. And in the 70s, were like, they kept calling, Card Walker or something. Like, we want to use this to build a Disneyland. And Card Walker didn't want to do it because he'd been in the war and he didn't like Japan. So, but, they made a ridiculous, like, okay, if you do this insane deal, that's good for us, we'll do it. And it somehow worked out. So they do think about where they build things in Japan, of course, temples and such. But Disneyland itself seems to have been kind of a economic convenience.
The other thing that you were mentioning, too, about how the newer parks have all this extra technology. There was this meeting that we had when I was at Disney where they brought Apple in, or they brought Microsoft in. And Microsoft at this time, this was before iPads existed, Microsoft had something called the Microsoft Table, and it was like a huge coffee table shaped glass with a projector on it. And you could kind of just imagine like a 4-foot version of an iPad before the iPad existed. And I remember at that time, you could kind of make your own version of this. All it took was a camera to see where you were putting your hands, and then a projector to kind of project something under it. And between these two things, you could make your own like 5-foot version of one of these. And I asked one of these questions of like, why are you guys investing all this money in making this huge table that cost, it was like $200,000 or something for one of the prototypes. And then this was before, that only bought you a carton of eggs, but $200,000 used to be a lot of money. And I remember asking, why are you putting all this money into this huge thing that maybe only someone the size of Disney or like a massive, 5-star hotel chain could afford? And they had a great response. I've never been able to forget this. And I think Disney does this at the same level. He said that, yeah, anyone can make one of these. You can get one cheap, but Microsoft and Disney, they're in this very unique place where if they introduce technology, they can introduce it to such a massive scale that no one else has the opportunity to. If Disney decides, hey, we're going to institute this sort of like near field way of searching. I think Kim Possible is one of these like games that they would do in these parks, that they can institute this on such a massive scale and have so many millions of people that are just a captive audience that they can train them on how to use technology in a way that no one else on the planet has that opportunity to. So some of this new technology they add to the parks, this isn't Disney saying like, hey, let's add a whole bunch of cool bells and whistles. These are technology companies, and you can read the subtext there, probably military at some level of their funding, but this is the way that they can beta test and how they can do consumer education on here's how Bluetooth works. Here's how near field navigation works, where you can walk around the park and it tells you to turn left or turn right and like map out the whole experience. There's not a lot of other places like a Disney World that they can institute it at that kind of scale. So this is another aspect. It's not just them making things cool. This is them allowing corporations and militaries essentially and governments to be like, hey, come here and test out all your cool new gadgets on all these unwitting participants.
And when they do it on their own, they tend to fail.
Right.
Disney apps are still based on Go.com for some reason, which was a disaster when it started and is only that much more of a disaster now. Disney Quest was the one where they're like, oh, here is the future stuff. And I love Disney Quest. It was great, but it looked ridiculous by the time it closed in 2016 or so, you know, with like 20-year-old technology that wasn't quite cutting edge in 1997.
I remember the first time I went to Epcot post tinfoil hat learning with my new eyes. You know, now I'm paranoid American going to Epcot, and you give them your credit card to buy your ticket, and then you have to give them your fingerprint to actually enter the park. So they've got all of your information, you've got your biometrics, they got your fingerprint. And of course, they're probably taking your picture everywhere you go in the park. And they know when you are getting on a ride or what ride. They know who you are. So I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, they're going to kill me. Right? You're just like so paranoid about things when you first start learning. But it was a big deal to put your thumb on that thing and submit to that kind of surveillance.
I did not have to do that going to Tokyo, but I usually leave my Bluetooth off because I think it does make me slightly nauseous. And I realized, to work this app, I have to turn it on. So yeah, they knew exactly where I was at any time. I mean,
well,
we all carry tracking devices.
I don't think they even need your fingerprint anymore. Now just
Probably
your heat
not.
signature and your gait.
They have it from the phone, don't they? They got my retina, right? I mean,
yeah, they've got everything they need to track you. And this actually goes to such a high level. One of the things that I saw personally there was they have these computer analytics hooked up. So let's say there was a camera at the line outside of Pirates of the Caribbean, right? And right next to the Pirates of the Caribbean, they had a restaurant, and they would notice that, software would be analyzing it constantly. It looked like a Vegas casino, like security booth room, but people were standing there, and they will know based on how many people are in line and how much turnover there's been in the restaurant, how quickly they're going through tables and everything, how long the people, as soon as they walk in line, it would have like a little number like, okay, the estimated wait for this person to get to a table is about 40 minutes or so. And then they would have the same thing going on the Pirates of the Caribbean. And once the wait time for Pirates of the Caribbean would be longer than if they just went and got something to eat and then got back in line, it would be the same amount, that the restaurant would all of a sudden put up a new special, or they would they would fire up a grill and just start grilling steaks or something, so that the smell of the restaurant would waft into this line of people, and they would actually be able to capture some of these people that are like, well, we're going to be waiting in line for at least 50 minutes, honey. Let's just go and grab something to eat real quick. But they would do it like the software would automate. It would know when to suggest this and when to orchestrate all this. And it just happened automatically. And seeing it actually happen was wild, where you would see someone think that they organically thought like, oh, let's go and get a bite to eat. It's like, nah, dude, that was programmed into you. Like that, you followed every single one of those steps and you just fit that formula perfectly.
I think I might have done that a few weeks ago for Pirates. I was about to walk on and a group of people got in front of me. I looked to the right. There's a little pavilion. I'm like, I should have a beer before I get on Pirates. And then I had a beer before I got on Pirates.
Well, I talk about this all the time. Like, how much of your personality is actually just an algorithm feeding you things and training you and entraining you to believe certain things? I mean, we all know that we're susceptible to propagandas or whatever, but literally when you get on these, TikTok or X or whatever, the algorithm is designed to mold you in a particular way or push you towards the right wing or the left wing or the red pill or the blue, just whatever that your tendencies are. They're going to try and push you further and further to just, split people apart.
Instagram's never got my number, though. Whenever I look at the recommended stuff for Instagram, it's just this wild, insanely mix of things that don't connect at all. So that's kind of fun. But other things, yes, for sure.
Well, I know like the phone wants me to spend all my money.
Yeah, Facebook knows you.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, I've occasionally gotten a thing from Amazon. Hey, you want this movie? It's on sale. Yeah, I guess I do. I mean, it works sometimes. That's why they do it, isn't it?
Well, now that you mention it, yeah.
You're like, I'm beyond that. I'm not tricked by that. But occasionally, I guess I'm going to be tricked by this. Why not? I guess I should just put the beam back on the laser beam back on Wall-E for a little bit before we wrap up today. I'm just looking through my notes and noticing that Wall-E and Ariel from The Little Mermaid have the exact same hobby, since we're looking for through lines in these movies. They both collect knickknacks, and then Wall-E doesn't sing, so they have to put on Hello Dolly, and of course Ariel gets her big showstopper number.
Right, and they're both after kind of the same thing too, right? Because The Little Mermaid, if you go to the Hans Christian Andersen, origin, the little Ariel is essentially trying to capture a human soul, and because they realize that mermaids, when they die, they just turn into sand and matter. They don't go to any kind of afterlife, but humans do. And if she's able to either kill a human or make a human fall in love with her, then she also gets to go to the afterlife. And I feel that that's also kind of what Wall-E's doing here. Wall-E is trying to figure out how he can, persist outside of his little robot body, or at least advance to some next level.
I guess that makes Otto your Ursula, and then all the fat baby people are your poor unfortunate souls. Is that how he can connect? I mean, again, it's not. I don't think they were making Wall-E and thinking that, but it's like, well, that is a recurring theme in some of these movies. So even subconsciously, it could break through.
And to speak to that, I mean, what they are trying to work on right now, the transhumanists, is how to create a vessel to hold a soul, a robotic, non-organic, something that can't decay, that you can just upload your consciousness into, and that will live forever. Right.
Or are you doing the Star Trek transporter thing? Now I'm on the planet, but you're actually dead.
Yeah. And watching that show Upload.
Yeah, that was another one where someone dies in like a car crash, but he gets his mind uploaded into this virtual world of DLC.
Yeah. And it's just space that you can buy. And if you run out of, gigabytes or minutes, like on your cell phone, then your consciousness just powers down until someone else can come and put money on your books. And then that way you can live forever. And the place that they go to is very much like the corporation of By and Large, because it's just a big company, and you can pay for upgrades like in heaven, like you want some kind of experience, but you still have to pay and listen to commercials.
Heaven is a commercial. Actually, you mentioned Battlestar earlier, and did you see the follow-up prequel show? Caprica really gets into that, where in the first episode, people are killed in a terrorist attack, and it turns out that their social media has made a simulacrum of them in the digital world. And then the whole point is getting one of them out and putting them in like the first Cylon body.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have to mention, every time Battlestar Galactica comes up, that's a Mormon show. That was written by a Mormon, and then it has very strong Mormon themes all throughout it.
Oh yeah, the original very hardcore, and then the newer one, I think he was still a consultant on it, but yeah, the original show extremely so.
Yeah, Mormonism is a space cult for sure. You cannot ignore that part of their doctrine is that you and your space spouse that you marry on Earth will go on to populate planets of your own children. And oddly enough, Aleister Crowley really looked up to Joseph Smith, and he thought he was somebody to emulate.
Well, probably the first religion to work space into its kind of doctrines. Every other one before that talked about maybe planets and stars, but this one was actually talking about space travel and inhabiting these other planets.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think Wall-E's a Mormon then?
Well, the weird thing about the end of Wall-E, I guess, as we're going to close the show, is so after he saves the humans on the spaceship and him and Eve get back to Earth, he's damaged in some way and he loses his consciousness, like he dies, right? So he is a messiah figure who has given his life for humans, and it takes the spark of Eve. So he's not Wall-E anymore. He's just a robot now that he's been damaged. And she's trying to wake him up, and he can't come out of it. And she puts her little forehead against his head, and this little spark electrical, transfer happens and he gets his consciousness back as Wall-E. And I thought, this is very Kabbalistic kind of in a way, because if you look into Kabbalah, they talk about how human beings or souls are just kind of like sparks. They call them literally sparks of the bigger God or Adam Kadmon.
And back at Epcot, the original Journey into Imagination did have the song One Little Spark powering it.
Mm.
That's when it was a rideable ride and not a piece of garbage. But
I got one other Mormon link to Wall-E, actually, that the captain that we meet, his name is Captain McCrae, and McCrae is a very important last name in Mormonism. First of all, that one of the McCrae, I think James McCrae, he's the one that designed the stake meeting house with these two giant Mormon temples on it, but also a guy named Alexander McCrae was a personal bodyguard of Joseph Smith. So the fact that the captain was also named McCrae, I don't know if that's a stretch or not, but McCrae, more so than other just random last names that you would pull out of the hat, has some very strong Mormon connotations to it. So it would make sense that you've got this Mormon captain out in the middle of space.
Have you ever seen the like footage of the Mormon endowment movie? I mean,
where like with the hand that comes through the curtain, or what?
When you join the temple in Salt Lake City, if you get to a certain point, you're showed a film, which is supposed to be like the true origins of life on Earth and stuff. I haven't watched the whole thing; it's pretty goofy. But what was I going with that? Mormon
Is it the 70s cartoon one?
No, they update it. And they get people to work on it. And I think actually some people who worked on they used scenes from Fantasia in one of their versions of the endowment movie. So yeah, look that up if you want to look at something weird on YouTube. Look at, like Mormon endowment, and it's somebody who got like secret footage of it.
Yeah, I'm always up for weird YouTube things. Any final points someone wants to throw out on Wall-E before we wrap this one up?
I've tried to look at all the other theories. I think we covered most of them. There's the cannibal theory. There's the Lucifer theory with the 666. There's also a theory that Wall-E has a virus, and that the virus is maybe what gives him his personality. And this is also based on the fact that every other robot on Earth is essentially dead or defunct. And you would assume that Wall-E being the one out, maybe he's the one that caused them all to be defunct. Maybe like the virus somehow is, if he's the original host, then it just destroys all the other technology that he comes into contact with. There's also a suicide theory that all of the other Wall-Es and all the other robots on Earth just got sick of cleaning up after humans forever, and they all figured out a way to kind of off themselves. There's one that the entire premise of this movie and the axiom was a slap to Walt Disney. It was like an inversion of everything that he thought that Tomorrowland and that the People Movers and stuff would amount to, that it was really just going to absolutely destroy humanity. So there might be some contempt for Walt in there. And then there was another one too, that there's almost like an alchemical aspect to this, because if you're creating the Philosopher's Stone, the precursor to the Philosopher's Stone is the lesser work, and the lesser work is an herbal stone, and it's usually when you can distill and calcify any herb you want into this like perfect white stone that you then like feed its own mercury into the salt. It gets complicated, but that once you create this herbal stone, then that means that you're worthy to create the Philosopher's Stone. And the Philosopher's Stone's this thing that would essentially give Wall-E human consciousness. So when he takes this plant and he puts it inside of Eve, and Eve is this perfect white sort of hard object, that this could be Wall-E creating the herbal stone. And then the very next step is that he literally ascends, right? And he meets humanity and he saves humanity and he brings them all back. So that maybe stretching a little bit, but there's also a very strong alchemical sort of plot line that you can overlay on top of this.
I'm sorry, I'm a dumb American. Are you talking about a sorcerer's stone?
No. So
No, I know what you mean. I'm just
Okay.
talking about the change of title of the first Harry Potter book in the States. Like, Americans can't understand Philosopher's Stone. Let's make it Sorcerer's Stone.
That sounds boring. No. I think the takeaway from Wall-E is that technology will reach a point where it's going to have to make a choice of good and evil, just like the Garden of Eden, right? And you're going to have the evil AI versus the good AI, and humans are being told that our survival depends on the good robots or good AI to save us from the evil ones.
But do note the choice of do we need all or want all the technology is not a part of the conversation.
That is not up to you.
No, unfortunately, it's not, is it?
Starlink exists whether you like it or not. And that's another thing when they blast off, you can see that the Earth is just covered in what they call space junk, discarded rockets and satellites and stuff. So the night sky is going to look a lot different in the future than it does now. Even the more we get things like Starlink and everything, it's just going to have a lot of stuff floating up there, just like Wall-E.
Like new astrological mythologies will start being born out of space junk moving around instead of the precession of the equinoxes. It's like this big cluster of space junk now takes on its own story.
Right.
Making me think. I just watched a Star Trek Voyager episode, Blink of an Eye, in which the ship is caught in the atmosphere, and on the planet, time runs much faster. So they see the ship in the sky for thousands of years. They create a religion around it. The main thing is to get astronauts up there and find out what it is, and then they disappear, of course, because time's all screwed up. And that's an interesting one for that kind of vibe. Space junk becoming a cargo cult.
It's kind of like that big garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean, right? Now it's in the sky.
Yeah, I saw a documentary where it was showing the shores of, do you know Henderson Island? It's one of the Pitcairn Islands, not the one that like 50 people live on, but another one, which is actually bigger, but I guess you can't live there easily. But yeah, it's shores in the middle of absolutely nowhere, close to nothing, is just covered in garbage. So trash islands infecting the real island a bit. I don't know. I guess we'll start wrapping it up. Jamie, you want to send our listeners in a direction for some of your content again?
Yeah, Jamie Hanshaw on YouTube, and make sure to click the lives because I was going through this book, and you're going to learn a lot about Disney. There's Disney and old Werner von Braun right there, making shows about rockets for children. Disney Masonic lore. He was not a Freemason. He was a Demolay. I know a lot of people get that wrong. Roy Disney was a Mason, but Walt Disney was just Demolay. We've got documents from his time in the FBI. So very, very interesting character and what came out of that. And then I have a channel on Rockfin that you can go to if you are so brave. It's Defense Against the Dark Arts, and we talk about black magic and mind control.
All right, Thomas, what's going on your end?
Just all of the things. I've got a million projects, a million plates spinning as usual. The best place to keep on top of all that is if you just go to paranoidamerican.com. And I'm also trying some new stuff for this year. So anyone that joins the Patreon or anyone that joins YouTube members, I'm putting all your names in the credits after all the different videos, including the one that you're listening to or watching right now. And also by popular request, the old, as Matt would describe it, aggressively positive Occult Disney theme song will be making a comeback. I'm working on a slightly shorter version of it. Someone also called it the Prince version.
That did. Once they said it, it made sense, and I'm like, I hadn't thought of that previously.
So the Prince version will be coming back. I'm just working on a slightly quicker version of it. The old intro was like 2.5 minutes. We're just working on like a 50-second version of it that's got the same vibe. So, anyways, if you like the new intermediary ones that I've been playing with, let me know. But the original, which I'll call the Prince version from now on, the Prince version's coming back.
Okay, cool. Which actually, if you do the audio version, you did hear the Prince version, because we have this weird thing where I put these out. This will be out in like an hour.
I don't know how you do it, man.
Time works out that way. It's just anyway, I do a lot of podcasting. Maybe that's why I can crank it out that quick. If you want to hear that, I talk about movies and music at Podcastio, podcastius.org, Twilight Zone, a whole bunch of films, and we've been talking about all the Planet of the Apes. I mean, 70s version. We want monkey suits. No monkey suit on, and no sail. That's how I am. But sail for you. You get a trip aboard the Axiom.
Ready for a cosmic conspiracy about Stanley Kubrick, moon landings, and the CIA? Go visit nasacomic.com.
nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
Never a Straight Answer is a 40-page comic about Stanley Kubrick directing the Apollo space missions.
Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
This is the perfect read for comic, Kubrick, or conspiracy fans of all ages. For more details, visit nasacomic.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.